Talks with the Russians are already happening tomorrow. Ukraine is planning another meeting with the Russian side in Turkey. I'll tell you what is known about this later in the broadcast. I'm Salomia Vititska. This is TSN. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch the broadcast, and be sure to leave your comments. What did you find most interesting? Here are a few of today's topics. The ongoing anti-corruption standoff.
This is the end of the independent work of the two anti-corruption institutions.
Did MPs really limit the powers of NABU and SAP? And why does the Prosecutor General need so many new powers? Hermes is on the Zaporizhzhia front.
It's quite tough here, because you simply cannot just drive around in a car, for example, with ease.
How did the Zakarpattia aerial scouts uncover enemy secrets and warn their comrades about danger? Boxes in the city.
There are 2 of them here.
There are 2 of them here. Oh no, there are 3 of them here. Why did these bushy-tailed creatures settle right in the very center of Kryvyi RH? And are the city residents happy about such neighbors? The Rada has passed a bill that limits the powers of NABU and SAP. That's how the head of the Parliamentary Anti-Corruption Committee, Anastasia Radina, assessed the Parliament's decision. 263 members of Parliament voted in favor. If the President signs the law, the Prosecutor General will receive new powers. So he will gain full access to the materials of any criminal case and will also be able to independently determine jurisdiction in NABU cases, transfer any case from NABU to another pre-trial investigation body, issue suspicions to top officials, and decide whether to close cases against the highest-ranking officials. Also, the prosecutors of the SAPO will be subordinate to the Prosecutor General in their procedural decisions. Opposition MPs and heads of anti-corruption agencies have already called on the president not to sign this law, as it effectively strips NABU and SAPO of their independence in their work. Igor Bondarenko will now tell us how the controversial law was passed in Parliament.
I will put these amendments to a vote one by one.
Surrounded by opposition MPs, the Speaker of Parliament brings amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code up for consideration. A blocked rostrum and presidium do not hinder parliamentary lawmaking.
This amendment is in the version that was adopted by the committee. Please vote.
Representatives of the European Solidarity and Holos factions called a bill of the destruction of the independence of SAPO and NABU. Anastasia Radina, head of the Parliamentary Anti-Corruption Committee, shares the same opinion.
Colleagues, this bill was registered on January 16th. This has already happened in the history of the Ukrainian parliament, and it ended very, very, very badly. I ask you, colleagues, not to deceive yourselves or the people by saying you are voting for some mild strengthening of the Prosecutor General and not the dismantling of NABU and SAPO. No, colleagues, what you are voting for now is the dismantling of the anti-corruption infrastructure.
The opposition emphasizes that the amendments to the document were introduced just a few minutes before the start of the session, which is a violation of the regulations. For not following the rules, they're trying to remove Ruslan Stefanchuk from his position. But that idea didn't get enough votes, just like the numerous attempts to block the consideration of the bill. The authors of the amendments, including Serhiy Vlsenko, are convinced that the expansion of the Prosecutor General's powers is already stipulated in the Constitution.
None of these amendments have anything to do with the so-called destruction of the anti-corruption infrastructure. We are simply returning to the constitutional framework.
A few minutes later, the adopted law is signed by the Speaker and sent to the President. If the head of state signs the document, the Prosecutor General will gain the right to take cases away from anti-corruption prosecutors and hand them over to other prosecutors, independently determine jurisdiction, sign indictments against top officials, or, at their own discretion, close anti-corruption investigations. The bill was voted on against the backdrop of numerous searches carried out by the security service among NABU employees. 2 bureau employees were detained, allegedly on suspicion of collaborating with Russian special services.
The only reason this bill appeared is because of active investigations into the closest circle of the presidential office leadership.
The heads of NABU and SAP held an urgent joint briefing and called on President Zelensky to veto the changes to the Criminal Procedure Code adopted by the Rada, which turned both anti-corruption institutions into mere window dressing.
This is the end of the independent work of the two anti-corruption institutions.
Right now, the President of Ukraine's signature is still needed, and we are asking not to sign this bill, but to return it with an appropriate veto. NABU and SAP were created as bodies with exclusive jurisdiction over fighting high-level corruption, with all the guarantees of independence. And this is a condition, among other things, for our progress towards Europe.
Opposition deputies have submitted a blocking resolution and are ready to challenge the adopted law in court. Now, Ukraine's financial and diplomatic support from European partners is at risk, since we receive funds in exchange for reforms, particularly in the fight against corruption. Ira Bondarenko, Oleksiy Zelenko, TSN 1+1. The European Union has already responded to the decision of the Verkhovna Rada. Brussels is seriously concerned about the actions regarding the anti-corruption institutions NABU and SAP. This was stated by European Commission spokesperson Guillaume Mercier. The official emphasized that both bodies are important for carrying out reforms in Ukraine, and it is precisely in exchange for reforms, transparency, and democracy that the EU provides financial assistance to Ukraine. TSN sources among European diplomats say that today's move could become a serious obstacle on Ukraine's path to Europe and will likely affect the assessment of progress for the country seeking membership. There was also a response at the level of the G7. The ambassadors of the G7 countries have expressed serious concern over the attack on NABU. They reported that they have already met with representatives of the anti-corruption agency and intend to discuss these events with the government leadership. The G7 ambassadors noted that they are closely monitoring the investigation into several NABU employees suspected of committing crimes.
Yevhen Baisyakov, the European Union is concerned about Ukraine's recent actions regarding its anti-corruption institutions, NABU and SAPO. These institutions are crucial for Ukraine's reform agenda and must operate independently in order to fight corruption and earn public trust. The EU provides significant financial assistance to Ukraine on the condition of progress in transparency, judicial reform, and democratic governance. Ukraine's accession to the EU will require strong capacity to combat corruption and ensure institutional resilience. The EU will continue to monitor the situation and support Ukraine in upholding the rule of law.
At the same time, the National Bureau officially denied that an employee of the Central Office of the Anti-Corruption Bureau was allegedly a mole collaborating with the Russian FSB. That is exactly how his detention was presented by the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU. And according to investigators, his handler was Dmytro Ivansov, the deputy head of Yanukovych's security, who helped him escape to Russia. The SBU claims that it recorded at least 60 instances in which the detained NABU employee passed restricted access information to Ivansov. However, the Bureau explained that the SBU had conducted a joint investigation into this unnamed employee with him 2 years ago, and at that time, found no evidence of his ties to Russian intelligence services. And today it became known that now NABU has notified the security service employee of suspicion, allegedly for demanding a bribe of $300,000. According to the Bureau, he, together with 2 accomplices, allegedly demanded money from a suspect in another case involving the illegal smuggling of servicemen abroad, and in return, they promised to destroy part of the case materials, according to NABU's statement. And what do you think about the accusations against NABU employees and the current standoff between the special services in Ukraine? Share your thoughts in the comments to this broadcast on YouTube. And, of course, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Meanwhile, I'll continue with the TSN broadcast. In the afternoon, the occupiers attacked Sumy again. Several explosions were heard. There were hits on civilian infrastructure, a medical facility, a children's playground, and cars were damaged. And the night before, the enemy dropped 2 guided aerial bombs on Sumy. As a result of the attack, 13 city residents were injured, including a child. Our Oksana Solodovnik is ready to tell you more.
Piles of broken glass, mangled balcony frames, doors, and furniture. Since morning, residents have been clearing out apartments shattered by the explosions. This apartment building suffered the most. From the 1st to the 9th floor, not a single window survived. The Russians attacked the city around 11 at night, a time when most people were already resting. Both glide bombs hit residential neighborhoods right next to the apartment buildings.
The explosion was so powerful. I can't even begin to describe it to you. I got up somehow, crawled out like this, shouting, "Don't touch me."
The windows are shattered. There isn't a single one left. Not a single balcony. Nothing. It even broke through people's walls. A shock wave went through. I just stood there, and only the pillow stopped it. And the child was actually thrown from the kitchen all the way to the front door. Poor thing. She scraped her knee, and now one knee won't bend.
13 residents of the apartment building sought medical help. 3 of the injured were hospitalized. The rest are now receiving outpatient treatment. A 6-year-old boy is also in the children's hospital. He was injured while running to his mother after the explosions. On top of that, he was very frightened. Doctors say his condition is now satisfactory. The blast wave damaged 5 apartment buildings. More than 150 windows were blown out in the apartments.
We're patching up the wall. It was hit by shrapnel. We're patching it up. Everything's cracked. Everything will be fine. We hope for the best.
Right now, aid is being provided by charities. We're distributing materials from the State Emergency Service. Utility companies and charitable organizations are boarding things up. First of all, they're currently dismantling hazardous structures. They brought in lifts. They've cleared the road. We're restoring power. The line was cut. The trolleybus line was severed. So these works are being carried out right now.
A civil infrastructure facility was also damaged, a shopping center. Nearly 20 cars were hit by debris and one burned down completely. Emergency recovery work is currently underway at the site of the impact. Oksana Solodavnik, Alexander Levin, TSN 1+1.
Kharkiv is again under enemy fire. In less than an hour, the Russians attacked the city twice with Chernica drones. The industrial area was under attack. Preliminarily, it is known that a private house was hit. Fortunately, there were no casualties. 3 dead and 19 wounded in Donetsk region. Around 5 in the morning, the occupiers dropped an aerial bomb on Kramatorsk. It struck a multi-story building. A 10-year-old boy was killed. 8 people were injured. Another city resident was hurt as a result of a drone attack. The occupiers also struck Sloviansk with guided bombs. 5 people were wounded in their own homes. 5 apartment buildings, an administrative building, and about a dozen cars were damaged. The enemy dropped 2 aerial bombs on Konstantinivka. There is 1 fatality, and 11 houses were damaged. And in the village of Sadov, in the Kherson region, a man was killed in his own yard as a result of artillery shelling. Another woman sustained shrapnel wounds in the regional center due to an attack by a Russian drone. Kherson was also shelled by the occupiers with artillery. 3 city residents were injured. The Dnipro region. In the Maziska community, a woman was injured by a KAB strike. About a dozen private houses were destroyed there. At night, the enemy attacked Odessa again with drones. There is 1 injured person. Several fires broke out in the city. One of them broke out at a supermarket in Prytolda, but firefighters managed to stop the flames. 12 cars burned down, and windows in apartments were blown out. Our Alina Chernyeva will tell you more about the aftermath of the attack.
The epicenter of the explosion was right under the building, but the lower floors, where the supermarket, bank, and gym are located, took the full force of the blast wave and shielded the apartments with residents from the impact.
It could have fallen on the roof right here on the store. If it had fallen there, I wouldn't be alive right now. But a miracle happened and the shell landed on my car. The most important thought at that moment was that everyone would survive.
Nadia, with her 11-year-old daughter and 5-year-old son, didn't manage to get down to the parking lot in time. They hid in the apartment behind 2 walls. After the explosion, the woman saw through the window that her car was burning below.
There was an explosion. We saw the fire from the kitchen. It's good that we survived. But my car burned down. It was very, very loud. Everyone was scared, really scared.
All 25 floors of the building filled with acrid smoke. The woman recalls how her parents called her in a panic, saying they couldn't breathe.
We've never run through Odessa that fast before. And really, really fast. Well, now I'm just so glad they're alive. They just inhaled a lot of smoke. Everything there is covered in soot, even the upper floors.
12 cars near the residential complex caught fire at the same time. They burned down completely. Several dozen more were damaged by shrapnel. But the rescuers quickly got the fire under control and cut it off from the nearest buildings and the apartment block itself.
There was a large-scale car fire in the parking lot near the apartment building. Psychologists from the State Emergency Service were working on site, providing psychological assistance. The fire station and the fire station dormitory were also damaged.
In the morning, utility workers are cleaning up debris and glass at the site of the strike. Residents lined up to get plastic sheeting to cover the broken windows. The staff at the fitness club are also cleaning up the shards from the large panoramic windows. During the attack, there was a security guard and a cat here.
Thank God there's a store downstairs and a gym here, and it was nighttime, so no people were hurt. If the strike had hit just a bit higher, there are apartments up there. I checked that the security guard was okay, went in, got the cat out. There was a ton of smoke in here. The business has suffered. We will restore the ego, pay taxes, and then only forward.
The impact cracked the hot water pipes in the house, and the parking lot, where cars were parked and people were hiding, was flooded. Alina Cherniva, Ivan Salchenko, Odessa, TSN 1+1.
Minus 1S, 300 surface-to-air missile system for the Russians, and right on their own territory. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports successful strikes on enemy equipment in the Belgorod region. And there, the Nebo-M radar complex was also hit. Such strikes by Ukrainian forces significantly weaken Russia's air defense system. Meanwhile, there were 176 combat clashes on the front line over the past day. Heavy fighting continues in the Pokrovsk direction. The enemy is trying to advance its offensive, and according to Deep State, the elimination of sabotage groups in Pokrovsk is ongoing. The enemy infiltrated the city, and our soldiers continue to search for and destroy sabotage and reconnaissance groups. In the Kupiansk direction, Ukraine's defense forces did not allow any loss of our positions. In other areas, the enemy is trying to attack, but these Russian assaults are being repelled. Over the past day, Ukrainian rocket forces and artillery struck 5 areas where the invaders were concentrated. They uncover enemy secrets and give timely warnings about danger. This is about the unmanned Hermes drones with vertical takeoff and wings for long-duration flight. They are being effectively used in the Zaporozhye direction by the soldiers of the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade. The filming crew of TSN correspondent Alexander Motorniai saw how they work. During the segment, there will be a QR code on your screens for a fundraiser to buy drones for the Unmanned Systems Battalion of the 128th Brigade. A lot of them are needed, so please join in and help.
Its name is Hermes, a lightweight, all-day aerial reconnaissance drone of the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade. It's tough here because, for example, you can't just drive around in a car. To see the crew of the Zakarpattia aerial scouts at work, you first have to get to them. And now, in Zaporozhye, in the brigade's defensive zone, it's a full-on quest right from the start. Ideally, the screen should stay dark the whole way. Am I understanding you correctly? But when the electronic warfare system turns on, the image freezes at about 300 meters. Enemy attack drones, I'll be honest, as an outsider, they fly deep into the rear here and hunt indiscriminately for anything that ends up in their sights.
16, 17, up to 20 kilometers into our rear, we've had strikes where our guys were killed. They just hit the vehicle directly.
That's exactly why, recently, says the commander of the Reconnaissance and Adjustment Platoon of the 128th Battalion of Unmanned Systems. Instead of an assault rifle, he now takes a semi-automatic shotgun with him on every outing. Is there really a need for it now?
Only for that. If, of course, you manage to aim in time. Well, you just have a much better chance of surviving, a lot better.
In the rear areas of Zaporozhye, mostly at night, enemy Sukhois dropped 500-kilogram bombs. The forward positions of Ukrainian defenders are mainly bombarded by the Russians with quarter-ton KABs.
Now, there's another significant problem for the scouts, specifically their jammers.
That's a direct danger for Ukrainian reconnaissance drones circling over enemy positions. During the last shift, Lacosta says, a drone had to be rescued.
We were informed that an FPV drone was chasing us, so we started picking up speed and making sharp turns with our wing, so to speak.
So it was really like a chase, right?
Yeah, and an experienced pilot, so to speak, brought it home.
That experienced pilot, a little over 20 years old, is called Casper by his comrades, and he already has thousands of combat reconnaissance flight hours over enemy positions under his belt.
In total, I think it's more than 1,500 hours.
Over what period of time is that?
Almost 2 years.
Here, we mostly work to adjust our strike UAVs, like FPVs, strike wings, and so on. Or we do free reconnaissance. If we spot something interesting, we pass it on to our duty officers, and they direct a strike asset.
They've detected dozens of Russian infantrymen, as well as plenty of enemy armored vehicles and artillery. Roughly at what distance do the Russians hide their artillery from the forward edge of the battle area? In the rear?
10 to 15 kilometers. A lot gets destroyed. Right now, our aviation is working really well with guided bombs, especially targeting enemy guns. Not long ago, a Pion arrived. It fired twice and was destroyed.
Seriously?
Yes.
Not least thanks to their presence in the sky, the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade has been thwarting the Muscovites' plans to break through the front in Zaporizhia for 3 years now.
The mechanized assault happened about a month and a half ago. It was a huge convoy, the biggest one there in 2 years, but it was destroyed, detected in advance. Now, it's mostly infantry assaults by small groups. Small groups, sometimes even just 2 people.
On the stretch from Nestoryanka to Stepov, the Transcarpathian scouts say the intensity of enemy attacks has decreased a bit since mid-July. Meanwhile, on the far western flank near the shore of the Kakavka Reservoir, the Russians have thrown in fresh special forces for assaults. Has the intensity of the assaults decreased? In the areas of Stepov, Sherbeki, and Nestoryanka, it has decreased. In the area of Kamiansk, it has increased. Their first assault troops have arrived there. There are constant assaults going on there. Is that the 22nd Special Forces Brigade? Yes. It looks like they've moved in there, and now serious problems are starting. From the southern section of the front in Zaporizhia, Alexander Motorny, Alexander Shayan, and Vitaly Ovsyannikov. TSN 1+1.
Already tomorrow, Ukraine is planning another meeting with the Russian side in Turkey. President Zelensky announced this, citing information from the newly appointed Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov. And he'll be the one to lead the Ukrainian delegation. Representatives from intelligence, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the President's office will also travel to Istanbul. At the same time, preparations are underway for a new prisoner exchange. Zelensky promised to share more details later. On July 4th, the 8th stage of the exchange took place. It was carried out according to the all-for-all formula in the categories of seriously ill prisoners and those under the age of 25. Since then, Russia has stalled the process, which had become virtually the only result of the June negotiations in Istanbul. The Netherlands will make a significant contribution to supplying Ukraine with Patriot air defense systems. This was announced by Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans following the online meeting in the Ramstein format. The official did not specify the exact amount of the contribution, only saying that the details would be worked out over a longer period. The Netherlands will also independently supply more air defense equipment. This includes ammunition for F-16s, counter-drone systems, and radars. Norway has also confirmed its intention to finance the purchase of a Patriot missile system for Ukraine. They will do this jointly with Germany. Berlin, by the way, announced that it had reached an agreement with the United States to provide 5 air defense systems to the Ukrainian army. Overall, following the recent Ramstein meeting, dozens of Ukraine's allies decided to launch a 50-day campaign to arm the country. The goal is to make Vladimir Putin interested in real negotiations once the deadline set for him by the US president expires. However, Putin has no intention of stopping, and all the evidence points to that. This was stated by the head of the main intelligence directorate, Kirilo Budinov. Russia plans to spend over $1 trillion on rearmament. This concerns the period up to the year 2036. And this is the largest armament program of the aggressor country since the collapse of the Soviet Union. The head of the main intelligence directorate is convinced the enemy is preparing for an even bigger war and is currently mobilizing all resources for it, increasing the number of military districts, strengthening its influence in Africa, including through proxy groups such as the Wagner PMC and the African Corps. There is also a growing number of information and cyber attacks around the world aimed at undermining democracies from within. He was wanted by the intelligence services of 4 countries at once. In Dnipro, a man was detained who had been sending out messages about fake bomb threats or wars across Europe. Threats to blow up educational and entertainment institutions were sent to the Czech Republic, Latvia, and Slovakia. Several times, classes had to be stopped and people evacuated. This prankster entertained himself like this for almost a year, and he was caught after a joint special operation by law enforcement from all the affected countries and Ukraine. During the searches, computer equipment, mobile phones, and other devices that the man used to send threats were seized. He is already in custody. He could spend the next 8 years behind bars. Meanwhile, the police are looking for his accomplices and those who ordered the threats. Meanwhile, in Russia, they're tightening the screws on the internet again. The local Duma has decided to punish users for searching for materials they consider extremist. Fines are provided for this. They're also introducing penalties for using VPN services and advertising them. And it's precisely thanks to VPNs that, even if a certain website or social network is blocked in the country, you can still access it. These measures will also apply to the occupied Ukrainian territories. Analysts say that the Kremlin is aiming to gradually restrict the use of social networks, especially Western ones, and the spread of information that is unfavorable to them. Previously, they had already slowed down YouTube's operation. Meanwhile, today Russian law enforcement officers conducted searches in the offices of Telegram channels that were considered loyal to law enforcement and the authorities. The Russian BBC service reports that the raids were carried out because someone among law enforcement was leaking secret information to the Telegram channel before official statements were made. And with that, I am wrapping up the TSN broadcast. By the way, how do you feel about these constant weather swings, from autumn downpours to real heat? Share your thoughts with us in the comments under this broadcast. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss our live broadcasts every weekday. And now, here are the highlights of the day. A scandalous vote. The Verkhovna Rada has passed amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code along with provisions that effectively eliminate the independence of all anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine. The changes, in effect, subordinate them to the Prosecutor General. The heads of NABU and SAP have called on President Zelensky to veto the document, which turns both anti-corruption institutions into mere window dressing.
This is the end of independent work for the two anti-corruption institutions.
Right now, the President of Ukraine's signature is still needed, and we are asking him not to sign this bill, but to return it with an appropriate veto. NABU and SAP were created as bodies with the sole purpose of consistently fighting high-level corruption, with all the guarantees of independence. And this is also a condition for our progress towards Europe.
Minus one S-300 anti-aircraft missile system for the Russians, and on their own territory at that. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports successful strikes on enemy equipment in the Belgorod region. A Nivo-M radar complex was also hit there. Such strikes by Ukrainian forces significantly weaken Russia's air defense system. As soon as tomorrow, Ukraine is planning another meeting with the Russian side in Turkey. Our delegation will be led by the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov. Representatives from intelligence, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the President's office will also travel to Istanbul. At the same time, preparations are underway for a new prisoner exchange. In Russia, they're tightening the screws on the internet again. The local Duma has decided to fine users for searching for materials they consider extremist. Punishments are also being introduced for using VPN services and advertising them. These measures will also apply to the occupied Ukrainian territories. Intense heat with brief breaks for rain and thunderstorms is returning to Ukraine. Temperatures will rise to 30 degrees across all regions. In the north, especially in the capital, it will be a couple of degrees hotter, as well as in the east, south, and center of the country. People are being urged to drink plenty of water and avoid spending too much time in direct sunlight.